One.
Hello, welcome to Godly Play with Christ the King Lutheran Church. I'm Mrs. Kathye Hamm, and I'm not live today, but we are telling this week's story on video, so you still get Godly Play even though I can't be live. I'm so excited that you are here today, and I just want you to take some time to get ready for our story today. So the first thing we need to do to get ready is to have you put away things that might be distracting, like, it might be a toy, it might be a pet, it could be a cup of coffee. So just take a moment to get those things put aside so you can concentrate on the story. And while you're putting those things away, I want you to remind you that there'll be wondering questions at the end of the story. And we have the same 4 that we've been having every week during this time of sacred stories. So you'll get to wonder those questions. And then now that you can wonder aloud, you can wonder silently, you can wonder by commenting on the video, all different ways. And you can even continue your wonderings after we're done if you have more thoughts. All right, now that we have our things put aside, we just need to get seated comfortably. If you're on the floor, we sit crisscross, applesauce, or zigzag in our Godly Play circle. But I just want you to be comfortable today so that you can focus on the story, the important story today. All right, so we're seated comfortable, our distractions are put away, and now it's time to do our final thing to get ready for the story today, and that's take 3 deep breaths together. Let's take a deep breath in for God the Father, a deep breath in for God the Son, and a deep breath in for God the Holy Spirit. All right, now we are ready to begin the story of the great family. This is a desert bag. So many important things happen to the people of God in the desert that we have to have desert in our classroom, our Godly Playroom. And we can't have the whole desert there, or that would not work at all. So instead we have just a piece, just enough right here in our desert bag. The desert is a dangerous place. People only go there if they have to. There's very little food and water in the desert. You can die without food and water. At night, the sun is burning hot, and people have to wear a lot of clothes to protect themselves from the sun and the blowing sand. But at night, the desert is very cold, and people have to wear a lot of clothes to protect themselves from the cold. When the wind blows, it changes the shape of the desert, and it makes it very hard to find your way. Sometimes people don't come back. The desert is a dangerous place. People only go there if they have to. After the flood, creatures began to go to all 4 corners of the earth to fill the world with life again. They often gathered near rivers. The people began to build small villages and towns and even great cities. The greatest of these cities was called Ur. The people of Ur believed that there was a God for everything. There was a God for the flowers and the trees and the rocks. There was a God for the wind and a God for the sea. Their world was alive with gods. But there was one family that believed that all of God was everywhere. They didn't know it yet, but that is what they believed. In this family were Abram and Sarai. When the time came for Abram and Sarai to move to a new place, they didn't know if God would be there. They wondered what this new place would be like. But they packed up all their belongings and they gathered all their family from the very oldest to the very youngest. And they got their sheep and their goats and they started down the path toward Haran. At night they slept in tents. By day they followed the banks of the great river Euphrates. It showed them the way to go and provided water for them and for their animals. It was a long journey. Finally, they began to see people coming out of the city of Haran, and they knew that they were almost there. And then they arrived. Sometimes Abram would go out to the edge of the desert and look out into the sky. God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God that Abram knew what God wanted them to do. God wanted them to move to yet another new place. So Abram and Sarai did what God wanted them to. They started off across the desert toward Canaan. This time, there was no river to show the way or provide water. But still, they had all their belongings and their animals, and Abram's brother's son Lot came with them as well. And they made the long journey. They came to a place near Bethel, and Abram prayed to God, and God was there. So Abram built an altar and marked this place. They came to a place near Shechem, and Abraham prayed to God, and God was here too. So Abram built another altar to mark this place as well. God wasn't just here or there. All of God was everywhere. Finally, they arrived at Hebron and made their home near the oaks of Mamre. One night, God called Abram outside the tent. And God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God, that Abram knew what God was saying. God said, Abram, I'm going to make you the father of a great family. This family will have as many members as there are stars in the sky and grains of sand in the desert. God's promise seemed impossible. He and Sarai were very old. But God wanted Abram and Sarai to change their names anyway. Abram became Abraham, and Sarai became Sarah. One day, 3 strangers came out of the desert. Abraham invited them into his tent. Sarah mixed 3 measures of flour, which is a lot. She served them bread and meat to eat, and milk and water to drink, as was the custom. The 3 strangers told Abraham that he and Sarah were going to have a son. Abraham laughed. He and Sarah were too old. Sarah was standing outside the tent, and she heard, and she laughed too. The 3 strangers went on their way. And do you know what happened? Abraham and Sarah had a son. They laughed again. They decided to name their baby Laughter, and the word for laughter in their language is Isaac. The baby grew to be a man, and old Sarah died, and she was buried in a cave near the oaks of Mamre. Abraham was very lonely. He missed Sarah so much, but he had one last thing to do. Abraham sent his most trusted helper back to the land of his family to find a wife for Isaac. When the helper arrived, Rebekah was at the well. She offered to help get water for the helper and for his animals. Rebekah was as kind as she was brave. Then Rebekah invited him back to her home for dinner. The helper told Rebekah and her family about Abraham and Isaac and the great family. And Rebekah decided that she wanted to be a part of this family. So she and the helper started the journey across the desert. Past Bethel, and past Shechem. When they neared Hebron, Isaac saw them coming, and he ran out to meet them. Isaac and Rebekah were married. Abraham was old and full of years, and he died and was buried in the cave near Sarah by the trees. Isaac and Rebekah had children, and their children had children, and their children had children, and this went on for thousands and thousands of years until your grandparents had children, and your parents had children, and now you are a member of the great family whose members number more than there are stars in the sky and grains of sand in the desert. Now I wonder, which part of the story was your favorite? I wonder which part of the story was most important. I wonder where you are in the story, or what part of the story is most about you. I wonder if there's any part of the story that we could leave out and still have all the story that we need. Could we leave out Isaac How about Rebecca? Abraham and Sarah, did we leave them out? Maybe we could leave out the altars. Or Haran? How about Wonder if we could leave out the whole desert. I wonder. Now I'd like you to watch carefully while I put the story away, so that when we are back in our godly playroom, you will know how to put the story away when you choose to play with it. Let's see. Rebecca. Oh, when we put away materials that have been in the desert, we have to make sure that there's no desert on them, because we need the desert to stay in the desert bag and not go with the materials. And Isaac. And Sarah. And Abraham. And the altars. This is the hardest one to get all the desert off those little tiny rocks. Give them a little shake. And Haran. And and the great river Euphrates, and the river Tigris. And then to put away our desert bag, we get the corners, and we bring them all together. And then we pull it up, shove it down, and then all the desert is right in the desert bag. And the desert bag is pretty heavy, so when we're back in our godly playroom, I'll show you where it lives, and probably one of the adults will have to help you get it back to its place because it's a little bit heavy. Oh, I am so glad that you are here with me today in Godly Play. And I want you to remember that God is with you every minute of every day. And we will see you again next week. Have a great weekend.